Blimey, it's been a long year, hasn't it? Over the course of the last 12 months, we've made 23 individual episodes of this tedious little production. That's 10 more than we'd initially planned to make, and 10 more than any of you deserve, you pathetic little shits. But we did it. And what's more, we did it without making a single mistake. Yeah, that's a load of bollocks, isn't it? Over the last 23 episodes, we've misinformed you, we've left some stuff out, and we have, perhaps in the name of comedy, flat out lied to you, our loving viewers, like just then when I said that we'd lie to you, which was in and of itself a clever lie in the name of comedy. See, now you don't know where I'm coming from. But in the spirit of the season, assuming you're watching this during Christmas week and not say while sat in the back row of church during your father's funeral, we thought we'd go back and correct some of these glaring errors and omissions for you now, because we're nice like that. So, let's begin, shall we? Let's start at the beginning. 2 years ago, we made our pilot which looked at Doom for the PS1. Not a bad pilot, bit ropey in places, but you can tell our heart was in the right place. We did say one piece of bullshit though. They've also removed things like motion textures. Every texture you see on the game is static. There are no textures that move or scroll along walls. Yep, that's bullshit. While a lot of moving textures have been stripped out of the game, there are still some textures here and there that feature motion, so that was a load of bollocks. We also included footage of Doom 64 for the Nintendo 64, which, surprise, wasn't actually footage from Doom 64, but rather from a total conversion mod for a PC Doom engine. We wanted to include footage from the game proper, but we just didn't have the time or the money. I also said, the PlayStation version feels like the kind of thing that Stephen King would have written. Back before he started writing shit. Which, again, is bollocks. Obviously it's bollocks. Stephen King has never written anything good. Our first proper episode only has one error of omission. We never mentioned that the initial release of the game in the early 90s was published by Virgin Interactive, who published every version of the game except for the eventual Game Boy Color port. Oh, and getting jiggy with it was never socially acceptable. In episode 2, we joked about being unable to install the Japanese DVD-ROM PC release of Resident Evil 2, which was a comedy lie because we'd never even bought it. But everything else we said was 100% true, and you know that's true because we're the ones who said it, and we know. On to Resident Evil for the Game Boy Color. We didn't mention that there were actually 2 ROM dumps released as a result of the AssemblerGames.com fundraiser, one being further along in development than the other. We chose to look at the version that was nearer completion. Oh, and the DS port of Resident Evil was called Deadly Silence, not Deadly Science, although we maintain that Deadly Science would have been a much better name. Which inevitably brings me on to episode 8, Donkey Kong Country for the Game Boy Color. One of the things I didn't realise until after the episode went live is that in the Super Nintendo version, when your cart hits an obstacle and you've got both Diddy and Donkey Kong in the cart does a little hop jump automatically. It doesn't do this in the Game Boy Color port, and that's one of the main reasons why it's so incredibly frustrating alongside the fucking broken physics. I did eventually finish Minecart Carnage before we shot the episode, by the way, so why the level name is in red at the start of the episode. Oh, and take a look at my t-shirt during the close-up shots of me on the phone. Notice that it's a different colour? Yeah, I'm an idiot. Skipping ahead to episode 13, I forgot to mention that the Dreamcast port of Rayman 2 formed the basis of the 3DS port. I also didn't mention the DS version because it's shit. In the following episode, I mentioned that I wanted a sequel to the Pokemon trading card game video game, and there actually was a sequel released exclusively in Japan, which I'm told is pretty decent. Why it never got an international release we may never know, maybe the original didn't sell so well. In episode 16, I suggested that Ninja Turtles may be the only example of one game getting multiple ports for the same system. It turns out that's not strictly speaking true. This sort of thing happened often in the early 80s, just not necessarily concurrently. I actually discovered that Donkey Kong was ported to the Commodore 64 twice, years apart by 2 separate companies, which is something I'll be coming back to next year. Moving on to episode 17, and an error that almost everybody contacted me about. They emailed me, they left comments, they tweeted everything. Here's the mistake. I suggested that the red coins that appear in this game first appeared in Super Mario 64, which is bollocks, obviously. They actually made their debut in Yoshi's Island on the Super Nintendo. They're also actually called advanced coins in Super Mario Advance, but functionally they're identical. I also forgot to mention the port of the classic Mario Bros, which is included with all of the games in the Super Mario Advance range, because it's essentially forgettable. In our Worms the Director's Cut special, we accidentally showed footage of a Photoshop PSD file being imported into WordPress, which obviously is not going to work. WordPress only supports IFF files. I also said that Dream 17 was founded in 2003, but it was actually 2004. Turns out I'm just terrible with dates. Oh, and we'd intended to mention Amiga Forever, a totally legal Amiga emulation option, but we forgot. Whoops. Our Candle Cove episode split people into 3 groups. People who loved it and played along, people who hated it and told me never to do anything like it ever again, and people who thought it was an actual game and genuinely thought that we'd failed to include any gameplay footage. But it's right there. You can see it plain as day. Some people, eh? Probably the biggest, most glaring error in our look at Donkey Kong 94 was the complete and utter failure to even mention Mario vs. Donkey Kong, the spiritual successor to this version of Donkey Kong, which was released exclusively for the Game Boy Advance. We also didn't really talk about Mario's newfound athleticism, probably because he's been so athletic in games since that we rather took it for granted. In episode 22, we mentioned that Grand Theft Auto Advance zooms out when you're driving a car, suggesting that Payback didn't. Payback actually does zoom out, which only makes the low pixel depth issue worse. We've also since discovered a treasure trove of 3D games for the Game Boy Advance, some of which predate Payback, and we'll be looking at those in the new year. And last week's episode, our last proper episode of the season, fails to mention that Mortal Kombat 4 was the last game in the series to see an arcade release. That feels important, like we probably should have mentioned it. Oh well. So that's it. The end of our very first season of PortsCenter. We'll be back in February with a look at some game or another, but before we go, I just wanted to say thank you genuinely and from the heart for watching the show, for supporting the show, and for helping to make all this possible. I hope I've done you proud, and I hope you've enjoyed the first season of the show, because starting next year, I'll be phoning it in and doing it solely for the money. See you in February. I've just been told there isn't actually any money. Shit. Oh well. Happy holidays and go away.
That was the last in the current series of PortsCenter. Coming up next on YouTube, it's a dog trying to bark the word hello, followed by a clip of a baby laughing at its own reflection in the mirror. And then later tonight, we have the last 7 and a bit minutes of an episode of Faulty Towers in the wrong aspect ratio. Don't go anywhere.
Fucking awesome. Yeah, that's not strictly speaking true, is it? In fact, I fucked up. I properly fucked up. Blimey, it's been a long year, hasn't it? You know what? Let me give it a second. I'm going to do this. You're going to remember that this was tedious and lengthy. Okay.